أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So in our today's lesson this is our third lesson, and in this lesson we shall be basically learning about the structure of reports. That is, how does a report look like? That is, what is the format of a good report? So that is what we shall be learning today in our lesson. So the lesson objective today is, upon completion of the lesson, learners will be able to comprehensively describe and explain the key components and structure of a project report, including the introduction, methodology, results, discussions, conclusion, and references, and demonstrate an understanding of how these elements work together to effectively communicate project findings and outcomes. So this is the broad lesson objective. Now, if we start, we need to answer this question. Why should a project report be well structured? Why should we have a good format? Why should we have a good structure? When we are writing a research or when you are writing a report, somebody can ask that question. So the answer is, a well-structured report is essential for communicating information clearly and effectively. It allows the reader to quickly grasp the key points and understand the context of the information presented. So in brief, that is the answer as to why we need to have a good structure when writing our report. So it enables us to communicate clearly and effectively. Clearly, basically meaning that we are presenting the information in such a way that our readers can easily understand, you know. And it also allows our reader to quickly grasp. If we have a good structure, then our reader they will easily comprehend our report. They will easily know what are the key points. They will easily understand what are the context of the information presented. So that is in brief why we need to do what? Why we need to have a good structure when writing our project. So what are the parts? What are the basic parts of a good structure or of a good report? Any report or any research normally has a title page. Even now, you are writing your thesis. Your thesis is a research report. So your thesis, the first page in your thesis or dissertation is the title page. Now, what is the importance of this title page? What is the importance? So the purpose of this page is to provide essential identification information about the report. So essential identification. So the title page is the first impression of the report. So the title page is the first impression of the report. So if there is a problem with your title page, this is the first page your reader is going to read. So it has to look good. It has to be very nice. If the title page is not nice, then people are going to have what? People are going to have a bad impression about what? They're going to have a bad impression about your report. So it includes essential details to identify the report and its author. So what are the components of the title page? Number one, you will always have the title, which needs to be clear and concise, reflecting the report's purpose. You know, for example, in your case, when you're writing your dissertation or your thesis, your topic, your research topic has to be on the title page. For example, the effect of training and development on employee performance, a case of the Habshil Bank in maybe Hargeisa, Somaliland. So the title is very important and it needs to be clear and concise. They normally say at least your title should be having between 16 to 20 words. It should not be very long. Number two is the author's name, the person. If it's only one individual who is writing the report, or team. Sometimes you normally have group project. So all of your names need to be in the title page. The date, when the report was completed or submitted. So it needs to be there. If it is February 2025, March 2025, it needs to be written there. Then there are also the other details. Institution. In our case, in your title page, you need to have Lincoln University, your department, maybe you are in human resource, maybe you are in accounting, maybe you are in finance, it has to be there, or sometimes organization if applicable. So these are the basic components of a title page. So here you're being given an example of the title, Market Analysis of Renewable Energy Trends in 2023. The author is John. The date, February 18th, 2028. Organization is Dab Shilbag. So this is just but an example of a title page. So this is the first thing that has to be in your report. Number two is the what? Number two is the table of content. So what is the purpose of the table of content? Of course, in your research, what normally comes immediately after the title page, you normally have the declaration page, you normally have the acknowledgement page, you also have the table of what? The tables and the figures page, you have the abbreviation page, then comes the table of content. So in a research or a thesis or a dissertation, there are some pages that will not cover here. So the table of content, what is the purpose? The purpose is to provide a roadmap of the report structure, allowing the reader to quickly locate what? To quickly locate specific section. So that is the main objective of the table of content. So it easily enables your reader to know, for example, the conclusion is in which page, the recommendation is in which page. So the table of content provides a roadmap of the report structure, helping readers navigate. Navigate means it enables the reader to move around your report easily, so they don't have to struggle to locate the pages or information in your what? In your report or your research. So the components of a table of contents, we normally have the list of sections and subsections with corresponding page numbers. So here is an example. So for example, you have the executive summary, page 2, the introduction, the methodology, conclusion, recommendation, and the respective what? And the respective page. Then number three is what is known as the executive summary. And sometimes this executive summary, in reports, it is known as executive summary. But in research, it is known as the abstract. And this is the most important part of your report. So what is the purpose of the abstract? It is to provide a concise overview of the entire report or research, allowing the reader to quickly understand the main points without reading the full document. So the abstract is a summary of all the report. The report maybe is 100 pages. So if it is 100 pages, if I want to know what this research is about, I will just go to the abstract. So in the abstract, I will know what is the topic of your research, what is your research problem, what is your research objective, what is your research methodology, the significant, the most important finding and recommendation, ila ghairi dhalik. So I will just know it from the abstract. So it is often the most read section. In any report, in any research, this is the part that is mostly read by many readers. So this section provides a concise overview of the report's purpose, key finding, and recommendation. It is often written last, but appears at the beginning. So the abstract, when you're writing a research, this is the last part you have to do what? You have to write it. But it is the part that it comes first, but it is the last part to write. So what are the components of an abstract? Number one, a brief summary of the report's purpose, a summary of the methodology that you've used in your research, the key findings, the main conclusion, any significant recommendation. And here they're telling us, although it appears at the beginning, this is what I was just saying, it is often written last after the rest of the report is complete. So for example, when you're writing your research or your thesis, the abstract, you will write it after chapter 4 and 5. But some students, what they normally do, they normally write the abstracts even before writing chapter 4 and 5. Because in chapter 4 and 5, it's all about data conclusion. You analyze the data. So after analyzing the data, you get what? You get the findings. And from the findings, you have some recommendation. And remember, the recommendations, the finding, it has to be part of your abstract. So you cannot basically have a good abstract unless you finish chapter 4 and chapter 5. So for example, this is an example of an abstract. So this study explores the impact of Islamic banking on economic growth in Muslim majority countries, comparing it with conventional banking system. Through an analysis of data from 20 countries over a decade, the research demonstrates that Sharia-compliant financial instruments promote ethical investment, reduce financial instability, and support sustainable development. The findings emphasize the importance of Islamic banking in achieving financial inclusion and suggest policy measures to enhance its growth. So one thing you have to know, when you are writing the abstract, you need to use the simple present tense. But of course, there are some people who normally say you can use the past tense. No, but it is advisable when you are writing your abstract to use present simple tense. For example, this study explores its simple present, explores the impact of, so through an analysis of data over a decade, the research demonstrate is simple present tense. Reduce is simple present. Support. So you need to always use the simple present tense when you are writing the abstract. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is the introduction. And the introduction in your case, in your thesis, it is normally the background to your study. So this is where you normally give the historical perspective, the theoretical perspective, the conceptual perspective, and the contextual perspective. So what is the purpose of the introduction? This introduction provides background information, defines the report's objectives, and it sets the scope. It sets the stage for the rest of the report. So you need to have a very good background, because that is what sets the stage for what is coming. It is basically telling us, or it is basically inviting us. It's like an invitation to read the research. So the invitation has to be very good. So in the component of the background, so it briefly explained the context or situation that led to the research. Why was this report needed? So sometimes in the introduction, you'll also find what problem or opportunity is being addressed. What are the objectives? So when you're talking about introduction, think of your introduction as the background. Number 2, research problem. Number 3, the research objective, the research questions, the scope, and the significance. All of those fall under the background of the research. So what is the objective? Clearly state the goals of the report. What question does the report aim to answer? What is the intended outcome? ماذا نريد وراء هذا التقرير أو هذا البحث? Then the scope defines the boundaries of the scope. And in a research, remember, you normally have different types of scope. We have the time scope, we have the geographical scope, and we have the contextual scope. We'll learn about it later. Now, look at this example of an introduction. The global shift towards renewable energy has accelerated in recent years. This report aims to objective to evaluate the current trends in solar wind energy adoption in Europe. The scope of the report is limited to what? The time scope, limited to data from 2020 to 2023, focusing on policy impacts and consumer behavior. This is the context scope. So it's very important when you're writing your report or research, it's very important to indicate the time scope. But many students, when they're writing the research, they don't indicate the time scope. That is from, are you going to write, this research is from January to March. We have to know the time scope of your research. Number 5 is the methodology. So when you're talking about the methodology, its purpose is to do what? To describe the method used to gather information for the report. So this allows the reader to assess the reliability and validity of the findings. These two things are very important. And in your research, you will find it in chapter 4 and chapter 5. Reliability and validity. When you are talking about reliability and validity, it is basically, we want to ascertain that you are actually measuring or evaluating what you're supposed to be measuring. And when you're talking about validity and reliability, it's, for example, about the research tools you are using. Most students, they normally use a questionnaire. So when you're talking about validity, you have to ensure that your questions in the questionnaire, they are well structured. Because if your questionnaires, the questions are not well structured, it basically means you will be getting answers or collecting information that are not even related to your work, related to your study. Now, this section explains how the data or information was collected and analyzed. So now the components of these sections are data collection methods, explain how the data was collected, e.g. through surveys, interviews, experiments, literature review, analysis of existing data. And you have to be very specific here. Then the sample size and selection. We shall learn more about this. So when you're talking about sample, it is a representation of the population. For example, if your population is all about the banks in Somaliland, that is your population. But your sample cannot be the all banks or the all employees in banks in Somalia. You have to choose from selected banks. Okay, sample size and selection. Describe the size of the sample, if applicable, and how participants or data points were chosen. Tomorrow, we'll talk about this, or after tomorrow, I think. Then we have data analysis techniques. Explain the method used to analyze the data. Of course, we normally have the SPPS that we normally use when you're analyzing your data in chapter 4 and chapter 5. Then we have the limitation of the methodology. And here you have an example of a methodology. Data for this report was collected. How did they collect it? Through a combination of industry reports, government publication, and interviews with energy experts. So that is how they collected the data, the method. How did they analyze it? Statistical analysis was performed using SPSS software. Okay, what were the limitations? Limitations include the reliance on secondary data, which may not capture real-time changes. So the limitation basically means sometimes in your research or your report, we normally have secondary and primary data. But sometimes some people, they rely more on secondary data. So secondary data might not give you the full picture. That is why it is normally advisable when you're doing your research to combine the two methodologies. That is the quantitative and the qualitative methodologies. So when you do that, then your research will not have lots of limitation. But if you just focus with the quantitative, then you are going to miss on the qualitative part. Now, number 6 is the findings and analysis. Of course, this is always in chapter 4, 5. So the finding and analysis, what is the purpose of this part of your report? To present the results of the data analysis in a clear and objective manner, along with interpretation of the findings. So this is what you will be doing in chapter 4 and chapter 5. So once you give the questionnaires to the respondents, they will give you back the questionnaires. Once they give you back the questionnaires, you are going to analyze it. And from the analysis, you are going to have findings. And remember, these findings are related to your research objectives. So the findings are related to your research objectives. If you have 4 research objectives, so your findings, they have to correlate to those research objectives. So this is the core of the report. Core means what? Core means this is the important part of the report where data is presented and interpreted. So the key components, we have clear presentation of data. It is advisable to use tables, sometimes charts, and graphs. It is very important to use the visual representation of data. Then also interpretation of the data. Then presentation of the data. This is just a repetition, using tables and graphs. Interpretation means what? Explaining the meaning of the data. What do the findings suggest? How do they relate to the objectives of the report? This is what I was telling you. Your findings should always be related to your research objectives in chapter 1. And what are the patterns and trends? Is there some patterns after analyzing? Is there some patterns like increasing, decreasing? So after analyzing, you will realize that there is a pattern. So you need to tell us something about the pattern. Then objectivity, which is very important. Present the finding without personal opinion or biases. After giving your questionnaires, maybe you might find the findings that you are not expecting. As a researcher, what you are expected to do, kullu hakka walau kana murra. Sometimes the reality might be bitter, but don't hide the reality. That is the reality, even if you don't believe in it, but that is the fact. هذه هي الحقائق. Now, this is an example of finding. The data reveals a 20% increase in solar panel installation in Germany, attributed to government subsidies. However, wind energy adoption has stagnated due to regulatory hurdles. Figure 1 illustrates the growth trends over the past 3 years. So this is but an example of finding. Then as we finish up, we have the recommendation, which is the tawsiyat. After you finish your findings, now as a researcher, you need to give us the word, al-tawsiyat. So what is the purpose of the tawsiyat or recommendation? Recommendation, the purpose is to suggest specific actions that should be taken based on the findings of the report. This is where you move from analysis to action advice. Like basically, you've analyzed, you have the findings. Now you are telling the government or you are telling the organizations, so you are telling them what they need to do. So, based on the findings, this session suggests actionable steps. So what are the components? Number 1, specific. They need to be very specific. They should not be general. They should not be general. Specific, actionable recommendation. Action means things that can be implemented. Your recommendations should not be things that are khiyaliya, imaginations. No, there should be things that can يمكن تطبيقها في أرض الواقع. It can be easily applied. Then justification for each recommendation. You need to give justification as to why you are recommending this. Then this is a repetition. Then recommendation should be directly linked to the findings. Then prioritize recommendation by urgency or impact. Remember, you can be having like 5 recommendations, but هذه التوصيات ينبغي ترتيبها على حسب الأولويات. فالأول بالأول. The most important thing, the most important recommendations that needs to be implemented urgently needs to come first. The ones that don't need to be implemented urgently can come last. So that is the formula. If appropriate, provide justification. We've already said. So for example, these are some of recommendations: increase funding for, launch public, provide, and you can see how the wording of the recommendation. Look at the wording: increase, launch, provide. كل هذه, it is like al-awamir. They are known in English, they are known as imperative sentences. Imperative sentences in English, they normally start with a verb. Or sometimes the recommendation come in the form of should. The government should increase. They should launch. They should provide. Now look at this recommendation now, which is very comprehensive. This is an example of recommendation in Islamic banking research. So we have the research topic. So they give you the research topic, for example, the impact of Sharia compliant financing on small and medium enterprise growth in Malaysia. So they give you the findings from this research topic. The study finds that Islamic financing instruments such as Murabaha and Musharaka have a positive impact on the growth of small, medium enterprises. However, the lack of awareness and understanding of this instrument among the small, medium enterprise owners limits their adoption. Now, this is the most important part, recommendation. So when you are writing the recommendation, it is advisable to do what? It is advisable to align the recommendation to what? What's the best word to say? So when you're writing the recommendation, because the recommendation, there are different people who are going to who can benefit from this recommendation, or you want specific people to act differently. So here you have recommendations specifically for Islamic Bank. What should they do? How should they act? Then you also have recommendation for policy makers. Then you also have recommendation for future research. This is the best way to put your recommendation. Of course, there are some people, they normally just write this recommendation all together. They put it in one basket. No. So it is advisable, if you're writing a research, what is the recommendation, for example, for the banks? What is the recommendation for the Mathalan organizations? What is the recommendation for the employees? What is the recommendation, Mathalan, ila ghayri dhalik? So this is the best practice when you're doing what? When you are writing recommendations. Then we have conclusion. Conclusion now is to summarize the key findings and provide concise answer to the research question posed in the introduction. So in the conclusion, remember, in chapter 1, you normally have research questions. So this is where you normally have to answer. This is where we normally want to find the answer. We will find the answer to the research questions. So the conclusion also summarizes the key findings and their significance. So what are the components? So in the conclusion, you will find the recap of main findings. Not all the findings, no. Only the main findings and the implication of the findings. What are the importance of these findings? That is the meaning of implication. What are the What are the importance of these findings? Why are they important? Then a brief restatement of the report's objective. You can also give us some highlights about your objectives. Then a summary of the most significant, this is just the repetition, a summary of the most significant finding, then a final statement, and that synthesizes the main points and provide a definitive answer or overall assessment. So in conclusion, you'll always find you have to so if you finish in conclusion, we know خلاص في الخلاصة خلاصة القول. So in conclusion, the renewable energy sector in Europe is growing, with solar energy leading the way. However, challenges remain in the wind energy sector, highlighting the need for policy reforms. Then appendices. Appendices, what is the purpose of the appendices? To provide supplementary material that supports the research or the report, but it's not essential for the main narrative. Sometimes it's not essential. So when we are talking about, for example, the questionnaire, when you write your research, you normally attach the questionnaire at the end of your research. So that is a supplementary material. For example, sometimes there is a letter, a consent letter for data collection. You can put it at the end of your research. So any information that you think is important or can act as supplementary, you normally put it at the back of your report. Any table, any chart, any graph, putting it at the back is a supplementary. So the appendices include supplementary material that supports the report, but is too detailed to include in the main body. So sometimes there's some information that are too detailed, you cannot put it inside the research or the report. So it's advisable to put it at the what? At the end. So we have raw data. Raw data means unprocessed information, charts, graphs, or tables. You can put it, it can act as an appendices, additional calculation. You know, these are repetition again. Raw data supporting documents, questionnaires. For example, interview script. So because for some students, they don't have a questionnaire. You are going to ask questions. So those questions, we need a copy of those questions at the end of your research. Then we have code used for analysis. So important, each item in the appendix should be labeled. So you have appendix A, appendix B, appendix C, appendix D. So you should not just put the questionnaire there, no. Label it as appendix, you know. So if it is appendix A, for example, the survey questionnaire, appendix B, the raw data table, appendix C, ila ghayri dhalik. That is how you need to do it. Now, the references in project, this is the last part. References is the last thing now that will appear in your research or report. References are a critical component of any report. Why? As they provide credibility to your work by acknowledging the sources of information, data, and ideas used. Proper referencing also helps readers locate the original sources for further reading. So it's very important. Of course, we have two types of citation. We normally have the in citation, and we normally have citation at the end of your research. So what you have here, these are the citation at the end of the research, you know. So you normally start with the International Energy Agency, the date, the year, basically, you know. Sometimes you start with the name, John P. Smith, ila ghayri dhalik. So, and remember, this list has to be very comprehensive of all the references that you've used in your report. Some students, what I've realized when I am evaluating their thesis, there are some in citation, you've used them inside your research, but it is not in the list. So if I find that mistake, you lose some marks, you don't get some marks. So always ensure that if you have 50 in citation, in the reference list, you should also have 50. But because some students, they're just copy pasting, it is not their work, they just copy paste, or maybe somebody is writing the research for them and they don't review it, you find them submitting work that is below standard and they end up scoring low marks. So if you follow all these guidelines, you can create reports that are clear, concise, and effectively communicate your message to the intended audience. Remember that the specific structure and components may vary slightly depending on the type of report and the requirement of the organization or client. So this structure, basically, it's not the same. Like the Lincoln structure, maybe it's not the same with Ahmad University. Ahmad University is not the same with Hargeisa or Mogadishu University. So every university, they have their format. But at the end of the day, the content is the same. The structure is only the structure that is different. Is it clear? Now, is there any question? We are through as I take the attendance. Is there any question?
Yes. Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please, Abdulkadir.
When it comes to the preference, by the time you are writing the citation,
Now,
normally for example, the literature review chapter 2, we took from different sources. So these they also took that source, another source, what they wrote there. So by the time I'm taking this reference, should I take the exact journal that I took that data from, or I take the references that are in that journal?
So you can do both. You can take the references. You can just take. In fact, that is the best practice. You can just take the references from directly from the journal. Because anything that is in the journal also has a what? It also has a table. It also has a list of references, right?
Yeah, it has
So
a references below.
You can just use that, no problem. Just go to the journal. At the end of the journal, there is the list of references. Use those lists of references.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question, please? So if there is no any other question, we'll also meet tomorrow. So we'll meet tomorrow, then Thursday and Friday. Then by next week on Wednesday, we will be finishing this course. Then there will be I will give you an assignment. Your assignment will be a quiz. The quiz will be, I'll give you the information about the quiz as time goes, inshallah. Okay?
Inshallah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Wassalam.